You can see it here in our framework. Ito yung sinasabi nating knowledge gaps.
When there are blank gap or blind gap.
Okay. Existing in the literature. Tama ba yan? May gaps tayong nakikita. For example, on a topic, several researchers may have worked on it. One topic, one researcher ended up with an acceptance of a hypothesis. In another research, the same hypothesis may be rejected. So the researcher is now faced with the dilemma of which is correct or which is which. Kaya when you find research gaps, no, in the literature, that's one source of a problem for identifying your problem. Or you find unknown information. You are researching on certain problems, but you have very limited, you have unknown information that you want to find out. There are conflicting data or research results and new approaches which need to be tested out and monitored. And normally, this is where you get the basis of your research problems. How do we start the process of identifying research problem? Ito po, ganito yung topic natin. The research topic must be translated into more specific research problem. So you begin identifying a research topic. No? For example, in this example, the researcher is interested in investigating the state of street children in urban areas, for example. Now you may be you may want to make some delimitations. What actually is the problem that you want to answer? So the problem could be, what is the situation of street children in urban areas? Afterwards, you formulate what are your objectives or aim of conducting the study. So maybe you would say to conduct a situation analysis on the needs of street children in 3 urban areas. That's how you proceed. Dr. Alvin and myself keep on reminding our advices that usually ang first step natin is do not begin to write or develop your proposal or even your introduction if you have very limited knowledge about the topic. So when you have chosen a topic, you upload it and then download related literature. You have to read a lot. You must have sufficient background about the topic. Limited or too little knowledge is dangerous, you know that. So you have to collect as many related literature as you need. And based, imagine i-upload ninyo yung topic nyo, which is street children. And maybe for master of study, I'm sure Dr. Nuki will require you no less than 30 related links. If you read heavily in 30 related literature na yan, you will be able to identify what is your primary concern or major focus in your research. Okay, so the literature will be a very good source of info. And then later on, you formulate the hypothesis. So this is the sets of procedures that you have to employ for problem number 1. Can you see that? That's the flow, no, of the study in conducting a quantitative research. What is a research problem in the first place? It is actually an issue born out of a perplexing situation where difficulties are observed to exist. And as a concerned teacher, for example, you would like to do something about the difficulties encountered by teachers in your school. So that can be a good source of research problem for your thesis or your dissertation. It is usually considered as a situations that need to be changed or addressed. Sometimes there is an operating procedure. No? There is a system that is already ongoing. But the implementation of the system or the procedure creates problems among the respondents or among the teachers. That gives us the idea that something has to be done about the existing policies, existing system or procedure. All right. Or these problems consist of areas of concern, identifying conditions to be improved, more specifically, difficulties to be eliminated, and you would want to identify questions that seek answers. All right. Here are some examples. How do you go about it? No, look at this. This is one quantitative research that I got from some from the literature. Look at this. Here is a quantitative research design presenting problem statement and sub-problems. In other words, there is already a formulated major problem and specific problems. For example, the primary purpose of the study was to determine if there is any significant difference between the effects of written exercises and the frequency of tests on the retention and academic achievement of students in mathematics. My dear co-teachers, in a quantitative research design, at the very start, your IV must be well identified and your DV must be clear to the researcher. In this example that I'm presenting to you, what do you think is our independent variable? Would you kindly read this part and tell me what are the independent variables of the study? Requiring kayo ni Dr. Nuki niyan sa conceptual framework ninyo.
The effects of written exercises and frequency of tests.
Very good. These are the two independent variables, no? Effects of written exercises and frequency of tests. And our dependent variable would be
retention and academic achievement of
very well
students in
said. Okay,
mathematics.
retention rate and levels of academic achievements of the student. So at the very start, this must be clear to the researcher doing a quantitative study para hindi magulo yung study nyo. Dapat you know what your key variables are. What are your IVs? What are your DVs? Better still, if you can identify the sub-variables for each. All right. Re-requiring kayo niya pagpo-formulate ninyo ng conceptual framework of the study. So this is our major problem. And here are some possible specific problems that your study can answer. First, does giving frequent tests in mathematics promote better retention of the lessons taught in the class than just giving written exercises to the students? Oh, as practicing teachers, what are your personal experiences? Does giving frequent tests promote retentions of the lessons taught and than just giving written exercises to the students? Maigi ba yung madalas ang test? Almost every day may test kayo. May not be exactly necessary, no? Second questions that can be answered would be, Does giving frequent tests in mathematics promote better academic achievement of the lessons taught to the students than just giving written exercises in the class? A third possible specific question is, do the effects of written exercises and test frequency on the academic performance of students with different abilities in mathematics vary according to the term of examinations and many more? At least you have hit already, no? The major issues. The correlation between effects of written exercises and retention rate, test frequency and retention rate, and then effects of written exercises and test frequency on academic performance. So here is an example of a major and specific problems in quantitative research. So unless you have questions on step 1, let me proceed to step 2, which is formulating hypothesis. Well, I'm sure each one of you has your own views about what research hypothesis is. Anybody who would like to share his personal view on what research hypothesis is? What is a hypothesis? Anyone?
Hypothesis is a intellectual guess of the future results of the research might be.
Okay. Sabi natin, educated guess or intelligible guess of the researcher based on the phenomenon understudied. But my friends, I would like to tell you that a better way of defining a hypothesis is it is a tentative, reasonable, testable assertion regarding the occurrence of certain behaviors, phenomena, or events. Or sometimes we say it is a statement of predicted outcomes. This is according to Frankel and Wallen. All right? A statement of prediction in the study. Another is, according to Mertler and Charles, a hypothesis is a testable statement of a predicted relationship or difference among two or more variables. Kaya sabi natin, malinaw, no? A hypothesis is a statement of prediction. And then later on, the researcher will gather data and test whether the prediction is valid or not. It is a hypothesis, a tentative statement about the expected relationship or difference between two or more variables. Let me go to some examples. First, what makes a good hypothesis? No? A good hypothesis is one that posits a relationship or a difference between the variables. That is a major requirement. Second, it must be reflective of a theory or body of literature upon which they are based. Usually the hypothesis is brief and to the point. You don't have to make it verbose. That will only complicate your study. Be brief and to the point in stating your hypothesis. I'll give you an example later on. And be sure it is testable. It should be stated clearly and unambiguously in the form of a declarative sentence. For hypothesis, no? But for problems, lalo na yung specific problems, usually in interrogative form or question form. Yun nga natin ang some other discussions. The hypotheses are stated usually in the null form or of no difference or no relationship between and among variables. Second, it should include a very clear and objective direction as to how the hypothesized variables are to be investigated. Pag pinag-uusapan natin ay null hypothesis, there are 3 stems that you can observe. First is you make use of the phrase no significant difference or no significant relationship exists between or among variables. That's one stem. Pag nakita ng panel yung no significant difference or no significant relationship, automatic null hypothesis yan. The second stem na pwede natin gamitin ay sabihin natin X is equal to Y. In other words, sabihin natin the mathematical abilities of male student is equal to the mathematical abilities of female students. Ang first phrase natin is no difference or no relationship. Second stem is equal to. Or the third stem that you can use for null hypothesis is Y is independent of X. Y refers to your dependent variable. X refers to your independent variable. It should be well formulated and relevant to the main problems of the study and sub-problems. Each stated hypothesis jives with the pertinent sub-problem statement. On sub-problems which are hypothesis-free, hypothesis free, it should be stated at the outset of the section. In other words, I guess what is being referred to there is not all specific problems require the formulation of hypothesis. Only research problems require hypothesis. Ulitin ko. If you have 5 specific problems, it doesn't follow that you have to formulate 5 sets of hypotheses. If there are only 2 research problems out of 5, you formulate only 2 sets of hypotheses. Bakit set ang sinasabi ko? Null hypothesis, 8 sub O, followed by your 8 sub 1, the research or the alternative hypothesis. Siguro mas maganda kung we try to examine some example. No? Let us just remember, before we go to the analysis of different examples, I like to emphasize that a statement of equality between groups in an investigation is one characteristic of null hypothesis. So yung binabanggit ko kanina, gagamitin ninyo yung phrase na is equal to. Second, it states the absence of difference or relationship. Oh, yung stem na sinasabi ko kanina, no significant difference, no significant relationship. Okay? And the other one, parang ito, a statement of no significant relationship, no significant difference. And here are some examples. Okay, you can, if you read null hypothesis number 1, the mathematical ability of males is equal to the mathematical ability of females. Ano yung stem natin dito na ginamit? What is the stem? Tatlo yung stem na binigay ko sa inyo, no? Is equal to, no significant difference, y is independent of x. Look at number 1. Anong stem ang ginamit natin dito? Anybody?
Is equal to.
Okay, thank you. Is equal to, and therefore, null hypothesis is a no difference hypothesis. Second, look. Boys and girls do not differ significantly in mathematical ability. So, no significant difference. Okay? Yun yung second stem. Ganon din yung number 3. Iba lang yung statement. There will be no significant difference in the average score of the 9th graders and the average scores of the 12th graders on the ABC memory test. No significant relationship, same stem. No significant difference. Tingnan niyo yung number 6. The brand of ice cream preferred is independent of buyer's age, gender, and income. In analyzing null hypothesis number 6, what do you think is the dependent variable? Number 6, please. Paki-analyze yung number 6. Ano ang dependent variable ng study?
The brand of ice cream preferred.
Ice cream preference, no? Brand of ice cream preferred. That is your dependent variable. And then the independent variables or the predictor variables are
Gender,
Age, gender, and income.
and income. That's correct. Kaya diyan ko ginamit yung, ang stem dito is y is independent of x. Kita nyo? Y is dependent, correct? So we say the brand of ice cream preferred is independent of buyers, age, gender, and income. Well, that's what I'm saying. Another example could be when you say the probability of becoming a good principal is, sabihin natin, leadership or management performance of administrator is independent of gender. Okay? Management performance ang dependent, gender is the independent variable. So I hope null hypothesis is clear to everyone. Ano yung guidelines? Dapat para siguradong ayos ang null hypothesis natin. What is the first stem na hahanapin? First stem?
Is equal to.
Is equal to. Dapat makita yan. Second?
No significant.
Significant difference.
Very well said. No significant difference. And third? Y is
Independent of X.
of X. Yon. Thank you very much. Okay. Those are the three stems that qualify the statement of a null hypothesis. What is the other hypothesis? Yan ang tawag natin. Di ba yung null ay 8 sub O ang symbol? The research hypothesis, or sometimes called alternative hypothesis, is 8 sub 1. Remember that the alternative or the research hypothesis is the reverse statement of the null hypothesis. Example, usually called the research hypothesis. No? Pareho lang yung research hypothesis and null. Ang pagkakaiba lang, yung research hypothesis is very general. The alternative hypothesis is operational in statement. And it states the presence of, yung kanina pag null, the absence. Ito ngayon, it states the presence of a difference or a relationship. Always, the alternative hypothesis, the research hypothesis, contradicts the null hypothesis. The alternative research hypothesis is the reverse statement of the null. It states that there is a significant difference, there is a significant relationship, or that the difference or relationship is in a certain direction. It could be one-tailed negative, or it could be one-tailed positive. I'll give you an example later on. Always, it is a statement of inequality between groups in an investigation. And the alternative hypothesis is a definite statement of relationship or difference between the two variables. Who decides on the tone of relationship or difference? The researcher himself or herself, based on his personal experience, his observation, or based on literature. Tingnan nga natin ang examples. Ito, directional hypothesis. Meron tayong tinatawag sa statistics na one-tailed hypothesis. The hypothesis is one-tailed or directional if there is a predicted direction of change. No? It reflects a difference or relationship between groups, and the direction of the difference is specified. Meaning, sasabihin natin, males have higher mathematical ability than female. Oh, ano lang, example lang. Ladies, wag muna kayong po-kontra. Example lang yan. Or maybe we say, male have lower linguistic ability than female. Kaya tinabi nating directional. No? Ang symbol natin ay greater than or less than. Is there a difference? If there is a difference, then one group has a higher value or a lower value. Kaya yung ating statement could either be one-tailed positive kung higher yung value, or one-tailed negative kung lower yung value. If there is a relationship, then the relationship is either positive or negative. Ine-emphasize natin yan. Pag naka-emphasize yung positive or negative, one-tailed statement. Pag walang emphasis on negative or positive, higher and lower, non-directional yung hypothesis, two-tailed test. Here are some examples of directional hypothesis. Look at number 1. Boys perform significantly better than girls in mathematics. Or maybe you say, there is a significant positive relationship between attitude toward math and performance in mathematics. Or maybe you say, second graders like school less than the first graders, but more than the third graders. Or maybe you can say students with academic disabilities will significantly have more negative attitudes about themselves if they are placed in a special class than if they are placed in regular classes. In other words, makikita natin yung symbol that A is greater than B, or ito. No? Or B is greater, or A is less than B. Kaya ayan ang tinatawag nating directional hypothesis. It is important that you are able to decipher whether the hypothesis is one-tailed or two-tailed, because you need that in making statistical decision. Pag ang hypothesis natin ay directional, ang gagamitin nating statistical table ay one-tailed table. Pag yung hypothesis natin is non-directional, ang gagamitin nating statistical table later is a two-tailed table. I'll show you that later on. Okay, non-directional alternative hypothesis reflects a difference or relationship between groups, but the direction of the difference or relationship is not specified. Let us analyze the example. Boys and girls differ significantly in mathematics. Why non-directional? It is not clear. It is not specified who has higher, who is higher in mathematics, boys or girls. Anyone may come out. Hindi ka mukha nung one-tailed, may predicted direction ka. It's either the boys would manifest higher performance in math, or girls would manifest higher performance in linguistics. Someone like that. Or there is a significant relationship between sex and mathematical ability. Or there will be significant difference between the scores on an attitude measure of students with academic disabilities placed in special classes and such students placed in regular classes. Okay, so we are done with step number 2, formulating hypothesis, formulating null hypothesis, and formulating research hypothesis. Unless you have questions, I will proceed to the next one. May we have questions on hypothesis formulation, research, and null?
None, sir.
Okay, it seems that the group understands hypothesis formulation very well. So now let me proceed to the next step, which is collecting and analyzing, interpreting data. So some tips that I would like to mention to the group. In implementing step number 3, it is necessary that the researcher chooses an appropriate instrument. When do you say an instrument is appropriate for use in a research study? Any wild guess from the group? Kailan natin sinasabing we are using the appropriate instrument? Yes, somebody was...
When the current box data is more than 0.7.
More than 0.70.
0.7, yeah, more than 0.7.
0.7. Okay, in other words, first, sinasabi natin appropriate instruments if the instrument is standardized. Pag sinabi kasi natin standardized, that has been subjected to rigorous validation and reliability procedures. Kaya may Cronbach's alpha siya. Not only that, pag standardized, mayroong manual or mechanics of implementation of the instrument. So that would guide the researcher in using the research instrument. Second, before you can collect your data, you must be able to identify a population group and a representative sample of the group. Two very important factors to be decided. Ay, isa pa dyan, yung sampling design na gagamitin ninyo. Yung identifying a population, you must be able to define the coverage of your study or the scope. Are you conducting a province-wide research or a district-wide research? Yes, please.
Doc, we're doing a cluster-wide because our school is divided into clusters.
Yes, I have no problem about that, particularly if the number or the population size is big. No? Kaya you can delimit it to make the study more manageable. All right? Pero dapat may target population tayo.
Yes, Doc. Meron.
Okay. And because the target population is normally big, you are allowed to use a sample. But the sample must be a true representative of the population. So my questions that I would like to forward to the group. When do you say a sample is a true representative of the population? How will you defend to your panel members that you made use of a good sample size? Any answer from the group?
By making specific groupings for its cluster school, we can determine we can be able to determine the exact sample size by making a description for its schools.
Okay.
For example, the some schools are bigger, so some schools are integrated, some are defined as small schools. It depends on the number of population that is in the school. So if a certain group of schools, they have a small population, they will be identified as small. That's what I did, Doc.
Okay. A more specific way of answering the question, kung tanungin kayo ng panel, no? What assurance can you tell us that the size of the sample is acceptable? Ang pinakamagandang sagot niyo dyan is you have to tell your panel members that you are guided by a statistical procedure in deciding on the sample size. Ano-ano ngayong statistical procedure na ginagamit? The G-power test, Sloven's formula, the Rose-Soft formula, or the Tachman's formula. Using any one of the four will give you an acceptable sample size. Okay? And then a second important consideration is paano mo siselect-in. Halimbawa, using any one of the four procedures, na-determine mo na 500 ang sample size mo. Ang next question is, paano mo pipiliin yung 500 na yan? So you have to choose an appropriate sampling design. Normally, for quantity research, the probability sampling designs are suggested. What are they? Simple random design, systematic random design, or better still, stratified random design. Okay? You use any one of those.
Thank you, Doc.
Okay. Okay, you use that. No? Kaya pag na-consider ninyo yung dalawang factors na yan, you are safe in beginning the data collection. All right, of your data. Okay. And then after collecting all the data needed, the next step is data analysis and interpretation. Ayan. Quantity research design ang pinag-uusapan natin. To do justice to data analysis in quantitative research, the researcher has to use an appropriate statistical test to analyze the data. So dalawang klaseng test ang pwede natin gamitin. Ano? Descriptive statistical test. Kung ang purpose ng study mo is to describe phenomena, describe practices, describe opinions, like that. Or you use an inferential test if your study would like to address cause and effect relationship. So, pag-usapan natin yung data analysis, very critical po dito ang choice of appropriate statistical test. Let me give you some tips on how to choose the appropriate statistical test. There are some critical factors that you have to consider in doing quantitative analysis. One is the choice of appropriate statistical test. Second is accuracy in statistical calculations. And third, analysis and interpretations of statistical results. Yung choice of appropriate statistical test is a function, no, of the, or shall we say, is approached better if you examine very well the functions of the test. Dalawang klase ang statistical test natin, no? Descriptive statistical test and inferential. Each test has a definite function, function or use. And the researcher must consider that very well in making a decision. Experience tells me, no? I like to think not too many of you are math or stat majors. So because of that, I have, if you are a stat majors, bawat test na pinag-aaralan natin sa statistics ay may corresponding function. if you analyze the functions of the test, you will know when the test is used. And if you examine very carefully the assumptions of the test, you will know when the test cannot be used. Let me emphasize that. For every statistical test, there is a specific function. Pag inanalyze ninyo yung functions of the test, you will know when the test should be used. Meron ding each test has a set of basic assumptions. Pag inanalyze ninyo yung basic assumptions, you will know when the test cannot be used. So dapat you will be guided. Otherwise, Vokel is a famous statistician from the United States, and he developed a procedure in making decisions about choice of appropriate statistical test. O, interested ba kayo marinig? Yung for non-math and non-stat majors, very helpful itong algorithm na dinevelop ni Vokel. Are you interested to see Vokel's algorithm?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yan. He begins by,
Yes, po.
by asking the question, if you are the researcher, tinatanong ka ni Vokel, do you like to describe the status of phenomenon? So, tingnan mo yung objectives of your study. If this is the objective of your study, Vokel is saying, if your answer is yes to the question, Vokel is saying, use central tendency statistics, variability statistics, or other descriptive measures. So what are they? Ano ba yung central tendency statistics natin? Mean, median, mode. Alright? Ang variability statistics natin, range, quartile deviation, standard deviation. Other descriptive measures, skewness, kurtosis. Ayan. So you use that. Vokel is telling you, these are the appropriate tests to use. But if your answer is no to the question, Vokel is saying, or Vokel would like you to answer another question. Are you comparing one distribution of scores to another? Para bang ang issue dito is, are you comparing the performance of school X with school Y? Is that the kind of question or thing that you would like to do? If your answer is yes to that question, according to Vokel, use chi-square test or critical ratio. Otherwise, if your answer is no, he would like to ask you another question. Or would you like to compare means of two groups or means of K groups? Ang tinatawag natin K groups sa statistics, 3 or more. What if you have 10 schools in your district and your supervisors gave you an assignment to conduct an evaluation of the mathematics performance of students? How would you do it? Siguro we can compute for the mean and standard deviation of the students in every school and then compare the result across schools. Kung dalawa-dalawa lang ikino-compare mo, pwedeng gamitin yung t-test. Pagka nagko-compare ka ng more than ng 3 or more, you can use the F-test or the analysis of variance. So this is what Vokel is saying. If your answer is yes to the question, how many means or how many groups are you comparing? If you are comparing two groups, according to Vokel, use t-test or ANOVA. Kung dalawang grupo lang. Otherwise, if you are analyzing 3 or more groups, okay, more than 2, Vokel is saying, use analysis of variance, never t-test. T-test is limited to 2 groups. F can be used for 2 and can be used for K sample. Or are you interested, if your answer is no to the question, are you comparing the means of 2 or more groups? Hindi yun ang problems ng study mo eh. Hindi yan ang concern ng research mo. So your answer is no. Now Vokel is asking you another question. Are you trying to determine how closely performance on what variable predicts performance on another variable? There is an issue of prediction, my dear co-teachers. No? Tinatanong dito is, this is a prediction issue. You would like to predict what will happen to Y for any change in X. According to vocal, if your answer to that question is no, think again. You either need a statistics not covered in these two chapters or have a mistake in your thinking. But if your answer is yes, very definite si vocal. He is saying, are you using a combination of two or more variables to predict an outcome? If your answer is yes, according to vocal, use multiple correlation. Kung relationships ang pinag-uusapan natin, ano? You want to measure the extent of influence. Hindi na ito correlation lang. Ang pinag-uusapan na dito sa question na ito is effects, influence, effects, or impact of an IV to the DV. Yung isa, correlation lang. So, ang pinag-uusapan lang natin dito, are the variables correlated? Okay. But dito sa continuation, hindi. You are going beyond correlation. The researcher would like to find out or would like to measure the extent of influence, the extent of effect, the extent of impact. And according to vocal, if your answer is yes, use regression analysis. Yung kanina, correlation analysis lang. Otherwise, if your answer is no to the question, are you trying to determine a curvilinear relationship? Ang ibig lang sabihin ng curvilinear relationship, non-linear ang relationship ng variables. In other words, pag ipinlat ninyo yung data, hindi ka makakita ng trend line na obliquely to the right ba or to the left ba yung trend line. No? So, yan ang sinasabi natin. If you don't see a trend line, the data are curvilinear in relationship. If your answer is yes to the question, vocal is saying use eta coefficient. Otherwise, if your answer is no, aba plain and simple ang suggestion niya. Are you holding a third variable constant? In other words, meron ka bang gustong i-partial out? No? Then use, if your answer is yes, use partial correlation coefficients. Otherwise, sabi ni vocal, simply use Pearson R. Oh, kita nyo? Very simple, no? Non-mathematical and discussion of vocal. Do you appreciate vocal's algorithm? Somehow it can guide you in making the right decision in choosing appropriate statistical test. Okay? Siguro, I would like to give you a little more orientations on the use of statistics. No? When do we use a particular statistical test? Kasi yan nga, pagka quanti, talagang very critical ang use of statistical test. Ito yon. For descriptive statistics, kung ang study mo is focused on description of phenomena, no? So, ang gagamitin nating descriptive statistical test is measures of central tendency. You use the measure of central tendency when the purpose of the study is to identify a typical value or a representative value of a mass of quantitative data. Tatlo po ang pwede nating pagpilian. The arithmetic mean, median, and mode. Lahat ito ay measures of central tendency. Pero may pagkakaiba sila. The mean is more preferred if the researcher is interested in computing the average score. The summation of all item values divided by the total number of items. Sometimes, measures of central tendency nga ang gusto mong gamitin, pero hindi yung average score ang gusto mong i-describe. But you would like to group the respondents into, let's say, two. Meron ka ng top achievers and high achievers and low achievers. Halimbawa, ganun yung klase. I remember there was a time in the public schools when teachers are asked to identify the fast learners and the borderliners. Ngayon po ba meron pa nun? During my days in the public schools, meron kaming fast learners class at meron kaming remedial classes. Meron pa tayo niyan ngayon sa school, public?
Yes, sir.
Yan. Kung gano'n ang intention nyo, hindi yung mean ang gagamitin, kundi median as a descriptive test. Pero kung ang intention mo naman is to describe the most frequent value or score, you use the arithmetic mode. Ulitin ko. All these three are measure of averages, central values. Pero may pagkakaiba po ng gamit. No? Mean is used if you like to describe the average score. Median, if you like to identify to separate the high achievers from the low achievers. And mode, if you would like to get the most common or most frequent item value. Another descriptive test na pwedeng gamitin natin is measures of dispersion. The measure of dispersion is used when the researcher is interested in describing the degree of spread. Parang kabaliktaran ng central tendency. Yung central tendency ang i-describe natin is where the bunching or the central location of the score is. Sa measure of variability, hindi yung central locations ang focus, but yung spread. How spread or how dispersed the scores are. Marami tayong nakukuha information pagka alam natin ang degree of spread. You're teaching, let us say, reading. Nagbigay ka ng test. There is a student who got a perfect score of 100. But there is also one student who got a score of 0 in a 100-item test. Naku, ano ba ang feeling mo kung gano'n na result ng study mo? May 100, nakakatuwa. May 0, nakakalungkot. So what insights do you have in mind? My dear co-teachers, anong naiisip niyong insight kung gano'n ang resulta? Nakaka-encounter ba kayo ng cases na gano'n? In one class, there is a very intelligent student and there is a very poor student. So what insights do you get? No? Tinitingnan natin na when the score is widely spread, sabi natin heterogeneous ang type ng estudyante mo. And this requires the teacher to be more creative in dealing with the students, no? In presenting lesson. Hindi pwedeng isang klaseng test or exercise lang ibibigay mo. While if the students are very homogeneous in terms of ability, it will not be very difficult for the teacher to handle the teaching learning process and the assessment process. Kasi isang klaseng test lang siguro sufficient na. So that is, pagka, yan ang sinasabi natin, measure of dispersion. Tatlo uli ang pagpipilian natin. Total range, quartile deviation, and the standard deviation. Yung range, ginagamit natin when you would like to describe extreme scores. You mention what the lowest score is, what is the highest score is, and the average score. You use the quartile deviation pagka nag-a-analyze tayo ng quartile ranges. No? You are analyzing the semi-interquartile, yung mga middle 50%, second quarter, third quarter. Sineseparate natin sa first quarter, at saka yung fourth quarter, yung magagaling. No? Yung fourth quarter natin, ay yan talaga mga eskwela na who are independent in their levels. They can learn without much assistance from the teacher. Yung nasa second and third quarter natin, iyan yung sinasabi natin mga average students. They are capable of learning with the assistance of the teacher in the classroom. Yung nasa first quarter, yun yung tinatawag nating salamat na lang na grupo. Na you have tried several methodologies already, but it seems the students don't show so much interest on lessons being presented. Kaya ang tinitingnan natin, interquartile range yun. But the best measure of variability will be the standard deviation. So ito, for higher statistical inferences, kung yung study nyo is very statistical, you will be required to use standard deviations over other variability indicators. So yan ang measure of dispersion. Yung other measures na sinasabi natin has something to do with the use of percentiles, quartiles, decile, percent, proportion. Andito po, no? I may not have all the luxury of time. And dito yung assumptions. When do you use each one? For example, percentile is used when you want to describe the percent of cases below a particular rank position. So I have indicated, no? When do you use each of the following statistical tests? No? I will not explain each one of them. I may be short of time in finishing my assignment. Okay. The other thing that we would want to present to the group now would be measures of correlations. Ito, yung measures of correlation, marami tayong measures of correlation. Most popular, ginagamit natin ng correlation procedures when the researcher would like to describe whether or not variables are correlated. And if the variables are correlated, the researcher would like to describe the nature, what kind of relationship exists. And finally, you would like to describe the magnitude or the extent or degree of relationship existing between and among variables. Marami po tayong pwedeng gamiting correlation statistics. Pearson R ay very, very popular and this is very powerful. Kaya lang ang power and strength of Pearson R is achieved when the researcher is analyzing data in the strength of interval scale. Otherwise, if the data are in the strength of ordinal measurement, in other words, hindi truly quantitative yung nakita mo, or the data do not meet requirements for normality of scores, ang ginagawa natin, the scores are ranked. And the researchers analyze the ranks, not the absolute values of the score. Kaya ang gagamitin natin appropriate statistics ay Spearman's rank correlation. Pag ang data naman ay nominal in scale, ang ibig sabihin ng nominal, categorical. Halimbawa natin, variables na, ang variables mo is academic achievement. Tapos ipinresent mo yung academic achievement in terms of outstanding, very satisfactory, satisfactory, fair, poor. Yan ang tinatawag natin, data are categorical in nature. Pag ganun ang tipo ng data, kaya naman, ang ina-explain mo ay level of organizational job commitment of teachers. Tapos ang data pinipresent mo ng very high, high, average, low, and very low. Ito yung mga topics or variables na measured using a Likert scaling technique. Gumagamit ka ng 3-point Likert or 5-point Likert or 7-point Likert. Basta gumamit ka nun, yun ang sinasabi nating data in the strength of categorical measurement. Alright? Itong nominal yon. Yung point by serial naman, ginagamit yan if the researcher is correlating dichotomous variable against interval variable. Ano ibig sabihin natin ng dichotomous variable? Data are categorized in two groups. It's either high or low. O kaya male, female. Or sabihin natin in favor, against. Pag ganun ang data, yun ang sinasabi natin dichotomous data. Okay? Tapos yung isang variable naman, interval ang scale. Ano naman yung interval? Yun yung numerical na pwedeng mag-construct ng frequency distribution. No? Halimbawa, pinag-uusapan natin is managerial effectiveness of male and female principals. Alin ang ating independent variable? Managerial effectiveness of male and female principal. Alin po ang ating independent variable? Any guess? Gender ang IV, either male or female. Wala nang iba. If the respondent is not male, sigurado female yan. Yun ang sinasabi nating dichotomous variable. Only in two and nothing more ang classification. Yung isang variable naman is interval. Sabi natin, managerial effectiveness. O kaya may rating ka ng managerial efficiency ng administrators. May be presented in terms of outstanding, very satisfactory, o kaya naman ay grades pala, no? 95, 90, 85, 83, 82, yun. Yung Y variable mo ay interval. Pero yung X variable mo, dichotomous. Is that clear to the group? Nakuha niyo ba yan? Kaya ina-analyze
Yes,
natin. Anong klaseng variable do we have? Ang tawag natin dito sa statistics, level of measurement of the data. Okay, if the researcher is correlating between a real dichotomous variable and an interval variable, then you use a multiple correlation. Yung multiple correlations, ginagamit natin yan pagka mayroong more than two variables being studied also. Yung partial correlation, ginagamit naman yan pagka mayroong third variable na gusto mo i-partial out. Bigyan ko kayo ng sample. Pag pinagawa kayo ng conceptual framework ni Dr. Nuki, tapos yung conceptual framework ninyo ay IV and DV, tapos naglagay ka ng moderating variable sa gitna, iyon ang sinasabi nating yung moderating variable, ang tawag natin kumisan dyan is extraneous factor. If you like to establish the correlation between X and Y, you have to cancel out or partial out the effects of the extraneous variable, sometimes called moderating variable. Paano tayo nagpa-partial out ng variable? Meron tayong statistical procedure na ginagamit, partial correlation. So these are, there are other tests, no, that you will be exposed to, lalo na yung nasa doctoral. Ito, kung study mo naman ay sabi natin dito, cause and effect relationship, multiple regression ang ginagamit natin. Pag ang study mo is about inferential topics, ang ginagamit mo, significance of differences, ang ginagamit natin, itong na nasa itaas kanina is relationship. Ito naman, significance of differences. Pag one sample group lang, ang ginagamit mo, students T ang ginagamit natin. If you are using two groups that are correlated, meaning matched or paired, ang ginagamit natin, t-test for correlated means. You are studying two groups, make use or drawn using sampling design, independent procedures ang gagamitin natin. Where is that? Partial correlation. Ang bilis naman mag-flow. Ayan. Partial correlation. All right. Tingnan niyo yan, ha? One group, and your purpose is significance of difference, students T. Two groups that are correlated in design, t-test of correlated means. Two groups, randomly selected, t-test of independent sample ang ginagamit natin. Or t-test of independent means. The other very powerful tests are itong mga non-parametric test natin to, no? Another we have the Kruskal-Wallis test, Friedman test, analysis of covariance, or the analysis of covariance. Yes. Okay. So those are usually the statistical tests that are very commonly used. siguro you need a second browsing of the topic. No? I will give a full text of the paper to Dr. Nuki, so you can get in touch with the secretary, and if you're interested, you can get a full text of the copy of the material. Ngayon, in doing quantitative research, there is a suggested format that Dr. Nuki and I are suggesting to our students. Ito yung suggested format. Hindi kasi maganda yung you do a research, pagdating doon sa chapter 4, nakalagay agad, first topic pa lang, table 1 presents. Pag-discuss, hindi pa nga alam nung researcher, anong readers mo, kung what the study is all about, ay pinipresent mo na kagad yung data. Kaya ang suggested format namin in doing quantitative analysis is make a very brief introduction about the topic. I'll give you some examples later. After making a short introduction about the topic, present the data gathered or the statistics generated from your computer printout. In other words, the tables will be presented. And don't forget, the data have to be analyzed after. Hindi matapos may present, tapos na. The data have to be analyzed and finally interpreted. So yan ang suggested format namin. No? Briefly introduce the topic, present the data or the statistics, analyze the data, and interpret the data. Siguro it will be more meaningful if I give you some examples. No? So I have included in my handout some illustrative case involving descriptive and involving descriptive, involving parametric and non-parametric inferential analysis. Descriptive and inferential analysis. Alisin nga muna natin yung non-parametric dyan. No? Descriptive and inferential analysis. Ito yung one study na kinonduct ng one of our advisees. No? The thesis is entitled The Leadership Behavior of School Administrators in City Division X and its Influence on Teachers' Performance. Tingnan ninyo, ito yung mga problems na sasagutin. No? First, specific problem na dapat sagutin. What is the profile of school administrators in terms of age, educational preparation, administrative experiences? I'll give you examples of descriptive analysis. No? Second, how may the leadership behavior of school administrators be described in terms of task and relationship dimension? What is the level of performance of the teachers in terms of teaching competency, professional development activities, and so forth? And do the leadership behavior of school administrators exert significant influence on the performance of the teachers? Now let us see the sample format that I have given you. What is the format? Brief introduction, present the data. What's next? Hello, are you still with me?
Analyze the data.
Analyze the data, and finally,
Interpret the data.
Interpret
The
the data.
findings.
Yes, thank you very much. Don't forget the 4 steps. Magbigay nga tayo ng sample. Very simple descriptive analysis of data. Kamukha nung problem number 1. Profile of school administrators in terms of, let us say, age. Ito, formulating hypothesis. So may hypothesis na finormulate yung researcher. No? Ang research hypothesis niya, the leadership behavior of school administrator influences teachers' performance. Null. The alternative hypothesis, the leadership behavior of school positively influences teachers' performance. Null, the leadership behavior of school administrators does not exert significant influence on teachers' performance. Ito po yung presentation. Profile of administrators. First step, sabi ko ay brief introduction. How are you going to present the profile of the administrators? Ito po ang very brief and a very simple intro. You tell your readers, the profile of the administrator respondents is presented in terms of age, educational preparation, administrative experiences, and trainings. Tapos present niyo yung table, yung data. So you can see anong ginamit na statistics dito. Frequency counts, percentage procedures, mean, and standard deviation. Ito yung mga descriptive statistical test natin. You still remember? Do you?
Yes, Doc.
Gugutom na yata kayo. O, sige, tuloy natin. Tingnan niyo yung sample. So, I repeat. Brief intro, tapos pinresent yung data. Ito na ngayon yung analysis and interpretation. So, in the handout that you will get, basahin ninyo mabuti. Here is a brief way. No? Hindi kasi maganda ang common error, my dear friends, ng mga teachers pagka gumagawa ng researcher. Nalalagay doon. 2 administrators or 6.90% are between ages 62 to 64. 3 respondents representing 10.34% are between 59 and 61 years of age. Isa-isang minimension to. Ano yung error na nakukumit ng researcher pagka ganon? Ang style of presentation.
Redundancy.
Very redundant ang kanyang analysis and that is not correct. Hindi kayo papalusutin ni Dr. Nuki diyan. Ito ang suggestion. Look, the ages of the administrator range from 35 the youngest and 63 the oldest. Anong ginamit ko? Statistics. Pinresent ko yung youngest and what is it?
Range.
Range. Very good. Ang ginamit ko is total range. Tapos, ito, the modal age or the most frequent age range from 56 to 58 with 6 administrators falling in this category. Anong ginamit ko yung statistics? Mode. Kasi ang dinidiscuss ko dito is most common or the modal age. Alright? Pero nakalagay dito sa bandang huli. The mean age was 50.58 with a standard deviation of 7.94. What does it mean? Ito yung analysis and interpretation. This means that the administrators were relatively mature to assume the leadership of the school. Not too young, not too old. A closer look at the age data would reveal the wide dispersion of the administrators in terms of chronological age, which means that City Division X has a combination of both young and mature principals. You see, very simple, no? Kasi yung data ay very simple descriptive analysis ito. Age lang ang i-describe natin. Pero how do you find the description? Redundant?
Concept.
Ha? O acceptable sa inyo yung presentation?
Very acceptable.
Okay po.
Yes, kasi ginamitan natin ng descriptive statistical test and we are able to avoid redundancy in data presentation. Let me bring to you another example of descriptive analysis, pero this time, medyo substantial yung data. Hindi profile. But we now go to descriptive analysis of the leadership behavior of the school administrators. Ito po ang introduction na ginamit. I'll read it fast kasi kapos na tayo ng oras. Kakapusin tayo ng oras. Leadership is considered a very important attribute of a school administrators. In the words of Halpin, leadership behavior refers to the particular role an administrator engages in school as he performs the arduous task of school administration and supervision. Leadership behavior as used in the study refers to the dimensions of how a school head initiates structures and how he or she practices consideration among his constituents. Initiating structure refers to that dimensions that delineates the relationship between the leader or the administrators and the members of the group. The efforts to establish well-defined patterns of organization channels of communications and the mechanisms to accomplish certain tasks. In other words, to make it short, ang ginawang introduction portion ng researcher is making an operational definition of the key variable of the study, which is leadership behavior. That is one effective way of introducing the topic. Kasi i-discuss mo agad, table 1 or table 2 presents the type of leadership behavior. Eh, hindi mo pa nga alam, ano ba sa perception mo, sa perspective mo? What is leadership behavior as used in your paper? Yon ang ginamit na introduction portion. You get the point I'm saying? What do you call this part? Hello?
Yes, sir. Introduction po.
Introduction portion. After that, you proceed to the next part. Ito ay discussion lang on how the leadership behavior was quantified. Pero ito na yung data. Yan yung presentation of the statistics or the data gathered. No? Relationship behavior is described in terms of low relationship behavior and high relationship behavior. Task behavior is described as low and high behavior. Paano ini-interpret yan? Kanina, ipinresent ko ito, diniscuss ng research, kaya ayoko na lang basahin dahil limited na yung ating time. Okay? You can make it part of your introduction. Pagdating dito, pinresent your data, ito na yung analysis. The data in Table 7 reflects of the 324 teacher respondents, 245, or 78.12% of the administrators were perceived to be high in task behavior. Only 79 or 24.38% were perceived to be low in task behavior. On the other hand, 233 or 71.9% were perceived to be high in relationship behavior, and only 91 or 28.09% were observed wanting in relationship dimension. Of the 245 or 75.62% of the administrators who were perceived to be high in task function, 169 were perceived high in relationship behavior. Only 26 were observed wanting in relationship skills. A better perception, okay, of the results was that 233 or 71% of the school administrators were perceived to be high in relationship, and only 91 needs to improve in relationship. Tingnan natin yung analysis. Ito. As a whole, it may be gleaned from the data that 169 school administrators, representing 52%, exhibit high leadership behavior. Ano ibig sabihin niya? This is a healthy sign considering that majority of the administrators exhibit a good balance of the task and relationship functions of administratorship. Tapos may citations pa siya rito coming from the literature. All right? So in other words, what I'm trying to present here, the result has been well analyzed and interpreted. Ito yung sa bandang huli, ito yung results niya. Okay? The findings that needs immediate concern is that 15 administrators were described low in leadership behavior. Yun ang concern ng study. How many of the administrators were found to be low? This means that, ayun, dinefine. And what do the findings mean? Lagi siyang merong ano. This means that the administrators are low in both task and relationship. These administrators need to recognize that effective school administrators are those with manifest knowledge and expertise. Teachers comply because they believe in and can learn from, or can otherwise learn from the expertise. Central to the effective leadership is that behavior that provides correct examples to the teachers. Only the administrators is strong in both task and relationship dimensions can give justice to the leadership calling of administrators. Beautiful. You see? That's what I mean. You do that for each table. To summarize, ano yung format again? Briefly, to summarize, briefly,
Produce the topic.
okay, briefly introduce the topic, present the statistics, analyze, and
Interpret the findings.
interpret. Huwag niyo pong kakaligtaan yan. Sample lang yan ng descriptive analysis of data. Mas maganda ang results kung inferential na ang study. No? ito, may mga test of hypothesis. Meron ako example dito ng inferential analysis, illustrative case. Correlations and regression procedures. No? We may be running out of time, but just the same, I will give you full text of the copy. Andito naman, no? Let's go to the introduction. Ayan, in-explain your case, yung case. Where is it? Ito yung objectives of the study. Afterwards, ipinresent yung mga assumptions. Parang that's made part of the introduction, no? Ayan, part of the introduction pa, no? Pini-explain yung systems, the elements, and then ito yung results. We need quite a long time in discussing the meaning of the statistics. Ngayon, after presenting the data, ito how did the values come out? Ginamitan ng pinrocess yung data using the statistical packages for social sciences. And the printout shows this. Tapos, what is important is you analyze the results. Ito yung analysis. Results of the correlation analysis reveal that 3 out of 5 factors are correlated positively. Second interpretation of the data. Ayan. The other factors, specifically health system factors and the demographic characteristics, are likewise correlated but not to a significant extent. Andito po yung example. So I may not have the physical time to present to you, but you will have a full text of the copy, and I am suggesting that you go over them. If you have some further questions, you know my phone number, Dr. Nuki can provide you that, or the staff. And you can phone me or email me for some questions that you have. All right? Ito yung mga examples natin. Ang daming examples dito na pwede nyo gamiting basis. Actually, if we have sufficient time, meron pa ako pin-repair na practicum eh. Pero hindi na. Makaka-apekto pa sa love life ninyo yan, ay Valentine's Day pa naman tayo. So I will end up the presentations with this and spend the remaining 10 minutes for the open forum. May I turn over the floor to our very able program head, Dr. Alvin Nuki.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ray, for that very comprehensive discussion of quantitative research designs, including their corresponding statistical analysis and computation. Hindi lang basta design ang binigay ni Dr. Ray, pati mga statistical tests.
Para may model sila somehow.
Mga model, that's right. And it truly, that for you to be able to say that your paper is a quanti, it's purely statistical talaga. Kaya talagang sinamahan na ni Dr. Ray ng statistical sample computation, including analysis. No, that's the best part of the quantitative research discussion of Dr. Ray was the analysis, because the computation is there. You have the SPSS, you have the Stata, you have the Excel softwares, but how to make sense of the data is the most challenging part of the quantitative research paper. So before we end, maybe ask our students from Mekawayan College if you have clarificatory questions or something that you would like to clarify from Dr. Reynaldo Cruz. Kindly state your name and where you're connected, and you may state your question para makilala namin kayo. Any questions so far? So kitang-kita nyo ng difference ng quali and quantitative, no? Talagang when you say quantitative, you have no other option but to have a good grasp of statistics and how to make sense of the data. Hindi lang basta statistics, but how to make sense of the computation. Unlike the qualitative, iba yung approach doon. Non-numerical ang qualitative. Ito purely numerical talaga siya. So any questions so far? Any question? From the chat box, I can read na Dr. Ray, they're thankful to your discussion And the discussion was very informative according to the students that we have from Mekawan College.
Thank you very much. Those comments are very inspiring. And once again, I would like to say thank you sincerely for your very kind listening and active participation.
All right. Sige po, sir. Mukhang wala na silang tanong. Maraming salamat, Dr. Ray. And we will
Thank you.
see you again, sir, sa defense. Meron tayong
Yes. Friday.
next Friday. And advance happy Valentine's Day to you.
Yes. Ikaw, ang hypothesis ko, na-celebrate mo na.
Sila magse-celebrate pa lang.
Oo nga. Sabi niya si Dr. Noki, advance lagi yan. Sige. Okay. Thank you very much, dear co-teachers. See you next time.
Opo. So at this point, we're going to declare a lunch break because in the afternoon, we have another topic, we have another speaker who will discuss on one of the very special topics, which is research publications. Research publications, its processes, credibility, and advantages. I remember in one of our discussions, Dr. Rinaldo Cruz discussed comprehensively how to write research for international publication. But in the afternoon, I invited somebody how to submit the paper for publication, the processes, and the credibility of the journal that you're going to, where you're going to submit your research paper, and the advantages of having your paper published. No? So we will continue at 1 p.m. for another set of lecture discussion from one of our speakers this afternoon. No? So meron pa po bang katanungan? Wala na? So kung wala na, we will resume at 1 p.m. Hindi ko na i-close yung ating